Hey girl, what you gonna do tonight? I've got my mama's car keys.
Hello, and welcome to the premiere episode of Your Favorite Flick. I'm your host, Brad Glazer. We're not going to waste a bunch of time here because the concept of this show is simple. We aren't here to be critics, we're here to be fans. Each week, we celebrate cinema by diving into one movie that our guest loves. For our very first episode, I'm sitting down with my dear friend Chris Bravender. He chose the 1996 co-directed Campbell Scott Stanley Tucci masterpiece, Big Night. We talk about the struggle between art and commerce, the messy dynamics of brotherhood, and how food is often just another word for love. It's a great conversation to kick things off. So, let's get into it. Let's get underway here. So before we get into the movie, tell me a little bit about your history as a movie fan.
Well, watching movies was always something that my family and I did. I remember going to the movie, before even Blockbuster, going to the kind of mom and pop movie rental places. And, I think that I grew up watching a lot of comedies. My parents were definitely into lighthearted things that we could laugh at and enjoy as a family. And I remember, especially around holidays, going to the big Blockbuster movies. And I think the older I got, I started to create sort of my own path in terms of my enthusiasm for movie watching and started to realize that, the list of things that I was interested in certainly created somewhat of a departure from the rest of my family. And so it was, there where I kind of explored that with other friends. I just enjoy movies from I think of it like gumbo here in New Orleans. It's like even okay movies, I really find a good use of my time. I can sit through movies that even I find just okay. And it's one of the, I think really important releases to be able to distract and then really escape into a feature film.
Yeah, I'm right with you. I often use pizza as the analogy. I like gumbo even more. That there's really no such thing as time poorly spent watching a movie. Don't get me wrong. There's some I might turn off if I'm just not into it. But if I do, I'm gonna flip on another movie.
Right.
And still spend that time doing the same.
Ex-
What role would you say that movies play in your life now?
I think that they play a lot of roles. I think that, it remains an escape. I think it remains a way to look for inspiration. In general, I think in song and in movies, that might be cliche in some ways, but there's no better opportunity sometimes for me to try to explain something that's esoteric to someone and to be able to use a good movie scene or to be able to use a theme in a movie that I think sort of unites people and we can all go, "Oh, I understand what he means now." Um, and then from just I enjoy sharing film with my wife. I enjoy, sharing the movies from the 80s and 90s that I grew up with my youngster. As a guy in recovery, I think distraction technique is something big that I've learned. And so I love being able to dive into a sentimental favorite or a movie that can bring me to a place where I was happy, perhaps when I'm having a day where I'm struggling. And so, yeah, and I think too, movies can be so powerful and thought provoking. I think that, a movie that really kind of pushes my comfort zone and then at the same time too, I think, inspirational to be able to perhaps, change my perspective on things, and so, man, I love a movie again to escape perhaps as a little miniature vacation. I love it to find that comfort perhaps, that, getting back to what works, and then I also love that it can, perhaps open up a new world to me.
Yeah, I really appreciate all that. And you talked about, movies can be a great happiness cue. One thing I find, and look, maybe this is me being a stereotypical male, but if I need a good cry, a movie's a good place for me to find it because I'm not somebody who can always just summon tears, but that can be a wonderful gift a movie can give me.
No doubt, no doubt. I think that, yeah, it's the escape in that you can sometimes get out of what your current situation is, but yeah, it's also that ability to escape and really believe and invest in something to where you feel like you're part of these characters' lives and that their lives are meaningful to you. And just the notion that some of my favorite films, like when I go about my day, I still, in the back of my mind, think they're living their lives, that they actually exist in the world.
Yeah, I love that. And then, I mean, in some way they do, right? I mean, if they're, this maybe sounds hokey, but if they're inside of us and we're carrying them around and they're informing our perspective, that's a way to live in the world. All right. Really appreciate that. Yeah, not surprisingly, I probably should mention for the audience, Chris and I are very old friends at this point. Boy, what, like, plus 25 years plus, right? So, we share perspective on a lot of these things, I think. Let's
Sure.
kind of dig in here. Now, I'm expecting for this episode, we may have an audience of up to 5 people, which is pretty exciting.
Whoa.
Yeah, yeah. I think they'll all be family members of ours, including kind of overlapping family members, but still. And I don't think it will be all our family, mind you. So, a few of these people might not have seen this movie. What is it about? Give me like the 20,000 foot view of Big Night.
So, two brothers come to the United States from Italy. I don't know that they ever really specifically get into where they are, but it appears to be the Jersey Shore. Um,
I
uh,
think that's right. I don't know if they say a town or anything, but I think it is the Jersey Shore.
yeah, and so they come to open an Italian restaurant in the United States, and the oldest brother, played by Tony Shalhoub of Monk, is the extremely talented but very set in his ways chef, and his brother, played by Stanley Tucci, is sort of the charismatic front of the house guy, and also the business guy. And so they're attempting to open a restaurant, kind of chase the American dream, but to do things their way. And they happen to be sort of located across the street from the very Americanized Italian restaurant that happens to be doing gangbusters business while they're struggling to get paying customers in the restaurant. And, such is the American dream. They're kind of on the brink of being foreclosed on. And so Stanley Tucci's character sort of goes across the street to ask for help. And instead of money, he gets this really, really unique gesture in that Louis Prima, close personal friends of the neighbor restaurateur, is going to call in and have Louis come to his restaurant, and that's really going to change things, for the fledgling restaurant across the street, and really the buildup, the preparing for that big night, and all that has in store. And so, that's from 1,000 feet. But man, I can't wait to get into the. There's a whole lot more happening, as you know, Brad.
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't even my plan, but you mentioned Louis Prima. Like you said, we're New Orleanians, so Louis Prima, I think near and dear to both of us. Talk to me about the music in this movie. I mean, his in the other, and how much of your love for this movie has to do with that music.
Well, like every good movie, I think it starts with the opening credits. I mean, the it really sets the tone. Um, you kind of understand that. Well, first of all, just from a pure period piece, like you understand that this is not. The movie was shot in 1996. It was abundantly clear this was not the 1990s in the United States. And the music really sets the tone for that. And I think it goes a long way in helping the audience understand that, okay, yeah, these are immigrants to the United States, and this is a time when immigrants are getting settled and trying to to become part of the United States. But the big piece for me is that the music just Louis Prima, as they describe, he's just in the film itself brings a lot of energy, very demonstrative, the kind of music that makes you feel something. And you said it, inextricably connected to this city of ours that, you know, take the good with the bad, but I love it at its very core. And so, um, I think the music makes me feel at home. It makes me feel, Brad, that my in-laws, particularly my mother-in-law, identifies as an Italian and as a Sicilian, and that pride in her heritage, is really pervasive, and it's really it's something that, you just can't know my mother-in-law without knowing it. And so for me, the movie has a lot of meaning because she introduced me to it, frankly. But that that you just feel family, you feel home, and it's all kind of connected with that music that again just makes me feel like there's a lot happening in this film, but it feels like a safe space for me.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Probably worth telling the audience that doesn't know. Chris's mother-in-law also is my godmother, and not that this isn't true in other places, but in New Orleans, that tends to be a very special relationship. So, one of the people we really have in common in our lives, for sure. And yeah, I hear you. That connection to the Italian roots. I also think about with Louis Prima, absolutely what you're talking about, tying into the history of these characters and in the setting of the movie, even though it's set on the Jersey coast, you feel that Italian influence. But also, there's something about Louis Prima as I think really fair to call a unique artist in that he kind of walked the lines between jazz and traditional Italian and some South American influences, even and some pop of the time. And somehow that seems to work for me in this movie, meshes with this story.
For sure. For sure. At the end of the day, while I think the movie has its um there is some sadness to it. There's some reality to it. There's some of the harshness of life. At the end of the day, it celebrates even sad things can be beautiful. And I think the music just sort of sets the tone that like, look, these are not the outcomes the characters wanted, but yet it was still this beautiful expression of all the things that humans want to do when they're at their best.
Yeah, it strikes me in your saying that, that I feel like most movies, even though you hear terms like dramedy, which is one I don't love, you can kind of say like, "Oh, this is either fundamentally a drama or fundamentally a comedy." And I'm not sure I can make that distinction with this movie.
You're absolutely right. And it's the kind of movie that I've seen way more than once, of course. And I'm the kind of guy that watches the movies around the house. You pick up something new every time, I think. And I think that my wife probably thinks The Big Night is a comedy, and I just don't know that I can. Again, it's it's certainly funny, but I don't know that I would call it a comedy, and I don't know that drama sums it up either. Right? I think that it's in some ways sort of its own style.
Yeah, right on. I totally agree with that. And I think, um, uh, your wife's perspective is completely valid too. Somebody could watch this and just really think of it as an out and out comedy. I think even some of the very dramatic scenes, I think, and we can get to this a little later, but I think the scene on the beach, for instance, like it's high drama between the brothers, but there's also some really funny shit going on there of
No
two,
doubt.
two grown men wrestling on the beach.
Right.
Um, so you mentioned that your mother-in-law, my godmother, introduced you to the movie. When did you first see it?
So I think this movie falls in the category of getting to know each other. So I would say that I probably saw it. Rebecca and I first started dating in 2008, and I think this was one of the films that she mandated I see before I put a ring on her finger. And so probably 15 years ago, around 2010 is when I first saw it. And it it became it became an overnight sensation for me, even though it was a film clearly from the mid to late 90s. I knew immediately that this was in my top 5.
Man, I appreciate that, and one of the things I loved as we talked about doing this episode together is we're batting around a few movies, and I feel like this is one we didn't know we had a shared love of. Like we both have cherished it for years, without having, to my memory, ever talked about it. All right, so let's really dive into the good stuff now. What are some of the things, and expand as much as you like here? We can follow up, whatever. What are some of the things that make this movie so special to you?
Where do I start? I think I have to start with the food piece, right? I think that make no mistake, as a kid in New Orleans, food is a huge part of my upbringing and a huge part of who I am. But I think it really transcends just cuisine. I think it's really about food as an expression, and I think that I could relate a lot to this movie because um, food was the love language of a lot of my ancestors and the people that came before me. Um, I don't want to give them, you know, a full pass for not being able to use language or other methods to express themselves because I certainly missed out on some of that coming up. But I think food was one of the vehicles with which I was able to know that I was loved. And I was able to see that you know, doing things the right way in the kitchen, doing things the hard way really was that's what you do when you're cooking for the people you care about. You don't cut corners. And it's a respect to the people who created the recipes. There is really just I think there's a lot for respecting recipes and respecting the process, but also just the notion of respecting a meal and that a meal is a
I love
living
the
thing.
scene where they are throwing the recipe cards around, and you get the sense that, like, these probably are not things Primo even wrote down. These are probably things their mom gave them that they're,
Right,
going through and having disagreements about still, but clearly cherish.
right. And so I just think that it really resonates to see people who really care and are passionate about um, the right way versus the easy way and doing things that are true to the culture and to the ancestry versus what is going to sell versus what are and so yeah, I think that speaks to a lot of things in terms of authenticity and in terms of um, art and passion and creativity versus capitalism, right? And what are we doing with a restaurant? What are the goals? Are the goals cash flow? Are the goals behinds and seats? Are the goals sticking to what um just being true to the cuisine, which is inextricably connected to a history of people, right? And I really, you feel that from Tony Shalhoub's character, and you really feel how conflicted Stanley Tucci's character is as the person who, as Stanley Tucci put it, I can't just have my head in the pot. I've got to keep this place open for you to be able to do that. And so you understand the precarious position that he's in. And he knows, right? What's beautiful about that character is that he's not trying to defend a madman. He knows how talented his brother is.
There's that great scene when he first talks with the other restaurateur, the first time we see them at least. And he says something about, about Primo being a great cook, the restaurateur does. And Skuna just says he's the greatest. Like, there's no question, it's a statement of fact.
Right.
And I'm right with you. I think a lesser version of this movie, Secundo, is purely the practical one and doesn't really have respect for his brother's craft and commitment, and just worries about the business working. I think that conflict in him creates the central conflict of the movie.
No doubt. And I think that, he's sort of mindful as he is. He knows that he has to somehow keep the restaurant open, but he's passionate about all the things his brother is too. Like there's a shared core understanding that what they're doing is special and it's different, but he also understands that in order to perpetuate this process, we need behinds in the seat. And yeah, going across the street was truly a last resort.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that. And, another on a similar note, what I was thinking about last night that I think ties into what we were just talking about is I also think a lesser movie would have made Primo strictly the chef, which he is the chef, but would have had Secundo only doing front of the house. And like the way he comes back in the kitchen and just so naturally picks up something to work on and that like they pass things back and forth literally and metaphorically. I think it builds a connection for the brothers that it would have been easy to bypass. Maybe a simpler script would have bypassed.
No doubt. No doubt. I think you have to notice that his knife skills, that being Segundo's, are important, right? Because you see that this is the food they cook together. And they are connected through that process. And I love even the little kind of banter in the beginning where Primo tells him he's cutting the garlic too thin, you won't taste it. Giving him that feedback as he is, clearly expertly slicing the garlic. This was not the first clove of garlic that Segundo had ever cut on.
Absolutely. And I think too, kind of going in the other direction, that as soon as he asks for the two bowls, Secundo knows he's making the timpano. Like all it takes is taking out two bowls. And it's just
Exactly.
like, wow, these are people with a shorthand and a shared experience.
Exactly. I can't help but think of the show The Bear, and obviously a different type of show, but what I think is special about The Bear, and I think it borrows some of this from a movie like Big Night, where there is a lot of communication that is not verbal in that kitchen. Um, and that obviously brings the character of Mark Antony into play, who doesn't say a whole lot, but man, what a really great role he plays. And I don't know much about his music, but I think that he is a central theme in this film that's really important to it. And the way the three of them just work, they clearly from the outset, that these three have cooked together for a long time. And the dialogue is not central to that communication. It truly is just a visual work of art for the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to be honest with you, I knew it at some point. I totally forgot that was Mark Anthony until you just said it. That is an incredible performance, in part because it has so little dialogue and he just has to express through his movement and his facial expressions what's going on with him. And I love that he clearly loves the brothers as well. And to me, you can feel through him the distress of the situation. Like they may have never talked money with him, but he knows what's going on.
It's hard for the movie not to sort of live within you for, days at a time. And it it is, when you think about, these are folks that are truly at the top of their game. And I mean, it's a symphony in the kitchen. Um, they are creating works of art, and there's nobody there to appreciate it except for them. And so, yeah, you have to know that Mark Anthony's character realizes that this is my life's passion. But if I don't have an audience, if I don't have diners in this place, then yeah, you have to see the writing on the wall. Yeah, I think it really hits at the as a human being. You have to think about that, right? To think about the this is what Tony Shalhoub's character was meant to do, and came to America in an attempt to do that and to share that, and to know that even in its fullest, most beautiful expression, sometimes there's just not a place for it.
Yeah, it's a movie that's both uplifting and heartbreaking. And I think you nailed it exactly. That uplift from spending time with this genius, not just him, but Secundo as well. but, obviously a lot of heartbreak in how does art survive in this world? How does it thrive?
Yeah. And I think that it's interesting that, I think it's important to realize that the successful restaurant across the street too, right? That is clearly that everyone has that Americanized Italian restaurant, even today in their neighborhood, right? Where it just strikes that balance of everything we think of when we think about eating Italian food out. But the restaurateur is not American. I mean, he's an immigrant himself, right? And talks about, you got to plant the seed, right? And I think that that's another piece, right? That could get lost in translation is time when you're borrowing from a bank and you just got to America that they don't you don't know your creditor very well or vice versa. Time is just not a luxury you have. And so time is a piece of the financing. Time is a piece of, there's a really great scene where Tony Shalhoub is saying, look, give them time and they'll come to appreciate it. They'll learn. And I believe it was Stanley Tucci who said, this is not a school. We don't have time for them to learn. This is a restaurant.
Yeah, yeah. And it's frustrating you're saying that, and I don't know that I've thought about it this way before, but there is a way in which death looms over this movie. Like not a literal death, but the huge stakes that's involved for these brothers, for where they stand in the world, for how they might progress or how they might have to regress. It really, I think it hits on that for me and what you're saying.
Yeah, look, it you can't watch this movie in 2025 with what's going on in the world and not think about um, what it must be like to be an immigrant to come to the United States. And you think about the courage that that probably took when they did. And more than likely, family at home that did not want to see them cross these seas and who, on some level, are waiting for them to fail and what coming home might mean. And so it's not just the love of what they're doing. I mean, it's the fear of failure, right, is at the heart of everything. And these guys have a lot at stake. And it's not just a restaurant.
Yeah, and so much at stake in terms of their relationship and how they think about the world. That also makes me think about I I love what is really Stanley Tucci's encapsulation of the American dream, where he talks about, in Italy you work and work and work and nothing, and in the U.S. Badoop 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 badoop, you're successful. That's not the exact line, but like
Right.
just in those badoops, he speaks so much about what this, country, what this world they're stepping into means to these brothers. And yeah, especially viewing it now, I probably hadn't watched it in a couple of years. You still feel that it's a struggle for them. I also have some sense of things being idealized, but that it was at least a time where immigrants maybe had a little bit more of a chance to build something of their own than many seem to now. And that's, bittersweet at best.
Of course.
I love what you talk about with the contrast of the two restaurants. And one thing I'll ask you there, do you when the other restaurateur says to Tucci, you have to give them the steak and then you can introduce what you want. Do you think he even believes that? Do you think he's somebody who has any intention to ever try to
No,
introduce them to something real?
no, he certainly doesn't. And I think that, the beauty of that character is that I think you see that you don't trust him from the very beginning, right? I think that the audience can dig into who this character is, but he says it for you toward the end of the movie when basically he asked Stanley Tucci, "Who are you? Do you even know who you are?" "I know who I am. I'm a businessman, and I can be whoever they need me to be." And so he basically calls himself a chameleon. He basically says, "Look, I am willing to be whatever it's going to take to put money in my pocket." That advice, which is give them what they want so that you can give them what you want, uh, was really lip service he has no intention of ever making timpani in that restaurant.
Yeah, it's hard for me to remember if I felt that way upon first meeting him the first time. I think I did, but like I've seen this, like you, I've seen this movie so many times that it's informed by what comes later. Um, One of the most amazing scenes and really most amazing shots in the movie to me is when we see the chef from his restaurant run out with his apron on fire, and have to throw it. It looks like he's, his whole, his whole chef's clothes might be catching on fire. And we first think, oh, this was some kind of kitchen accident. And then we see he and Liev Schreiber, another guy who went on to be famous, who's almost wordless in this movie. We see those two chasing out after him, and it's like, oh, this guy's trouble. Like, he's not just a bullshit artist, like, he's trouble.
Yeah, yeah. And if I recall correctly, that scene we see unfold because Stanley Tucci is on his way to have a rendezvous with Isabella Rossellini.
That's right. And then something that makes me laugh every time that isn't even so overtly funny is the little wave Stanley Tucci gives him as like he sees this happen, and like his eyes are wide, but it's like, oh, hey,
For sure.
So, with that mention of a scene, this is going to be a tough call, but do you have a favorite standout scene? Like, if you had to take, you know, 3 minutes from this movie and share it with somebody, what might it be?
That's a tough one. Um, and I think what is so beautiful about this movie is that um, the most powerful scenes are the ones where there's not a lot happening from a narrative perspective. Um, and so for me, my difficulty in picking a scene is not because I don't know, but it's because I struggle with the language to accurately express in a podcast why I love this scene so much. So I'm going to take a stab at it. And for me, it's been the same since the first time I saw it to last night watching it for the most recent time. And that is the morning after. When 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 Stanley Tucci wakes up and they're in the kitchen and he asks Mark Anthony, who had effectively been sleeping in the kitchen, if he's hungry, and he basically tells Mark Anthony's character, who would ordinarily be doing some of the menial work, he's like, "No, I'm gonna whip up breakfast." And there's just really not a lot said, but you see him very quickly go and make this very simple breakfast with eggs and with the bread they had made the night before. And you just see they don't have to say I'm sorry to each other. They don't have to revisit what happened the night before, which was a beautiful big night that ended the way a lot of them do, where it's just, man, this got out of hand. And the love in that kitchen is just on display as they heal together, as they acknowledge together that there's just so much said in that scene, and everything from watching Stanley Tucci whip the eggs and you hear that noise, that very familiar noise. And again, a very simple breakfast that you can put together in a matter of minutes and expertly make that egg too. Like if you're a chef, if you fancy yourself someone who likes to make eggs, which I do, watching him do it is just sort of a work of art. And then when his brother comes in the room, watching him stop eating his own plate and go over and grab a plate and serve his brother, his older brother, who he loves. You know how much those guys care for each other without any dialogue.
You know what gets me there too is he makes the eggs, and you think he's making them for him and Mark Anthony, but when he breaks them up, he leaves a third serving, and he doesn't know that Primo's coming in right then. But it's just like, if my brother comes, I have eggs for him.
No
I have
doubt.
cooked for him. And look, Uh, Chris, you and I got to watch the movie together last night, which was a real treat. And this morning I made myself eggs, and I'm sure it was a poor imitation of what he did. And sometimes I tend to do omelets. I do eggs with a lot of ingredients. This morning I just did the simplest eggs possible, just very
Yeah.
much inspired by that ending. I think I actually had in my notes here that I was, and I'm not going to do it now because you've already spoken so eloquently on it, but I was going to challenge you to name three movies with better endings than this, and I'm not sure it's possible. Like just not only that scene, but everything from the beach. And then you also hit on the scene right before that I really had a thought about last night. So the scene right before that, for anybody who hasn't seen it, is the one that Chris alluded to uh of Ian Holm as Pascal talking with Secundo and asking him, what are you? And don't get me wrong, I think I had this sense before, but the sentence that occurred to me last night is Secundo thinking in response to that, I am my brother's keeper. That, like, it feels like with that scene the next morning, that's the decision he has made.
Yeah. I think about brotherly relationships like that where they don't always see eye to eye, but that love and that connection is, I think of the movie The Fighter.
Chris, I have that on my list because one of the things I'm going to ask you at the end is about other movies you'd recommend to people that love this one. I have The Fighter as one of mine to recommend there.
Yeah, where brothers who look, they have history and they're certainly have different personalities, but y you just can't cut whatever connects those 2, and that's just super powerful. There's something really beautiful about a younger brother taking that role, but without it being, condescending. It's like, "I'm protecting my big brother. I know what his strengths are."
Yeah. I think in that scene, in those final two scenes, and again, starting with the one before that on the beach, he's come to that recognition that his own ambition, not that it doesn't exist, but that it needs to be set aside in service of his brother because he believes in his brother and loves his brother more than anything or anyone else in the world. And his life's just not going to make sense without him.
Yeah. And I mean, look, I made the comparison earlier, but you think about the show The Bear and just, you know, so much of so much of Carmi's character was just a reverence to his older brother and to wanting to work with him. I mean, I think that was a huge piece of him almost not, being deprived of that opportunity and what that meant for him to go out and show himself.
What an interesting contrast there because one of the big things in The Bear is that Mikey kind of pushes him away to protect him and, recognizes Carmi as the genius and like keeping him at arm's length, at least professionally, is part of how he deals with that. And we kind of see the converse of that here, that he realizes he needs to be arm in arm with his brother to support what he's trying to do.
Right.
And I think brings up a good question about the bear. Is Mikey wrong about that? Would Mikey have been better off taking a Secundo type approach, with the genius of the family? Not
Exactly.
that we'll digress too far into that, though.
Yep.
So, among the many things I love about this movie, and I feel like I could say that 35 times or more, I love how each character in this movie really feels like they have their own story, even if we get very little of it on screen. Um, who are some standouts for you among the supporting cast here?
So, um, I'm not great with the actors and actresses' names sometimes, but I think the flower lady, the love interest of Primo, I
Allison
think
Janney
that
is the actress.
yes. I mean, she's wonderful in almost everything I see, and I think that, yeah, just that character and the the awkwardness between them, but knowing that there's clearly the connection there. And I love how Stanley Tucci understands that. and is able to kind of step in and make sure that she arrives for the big night. And I think that she certainly was cautious about kind of crashing it. But the moment she understood that it was an authentic invitation, she was going to drop everything. I mean, not that she had a massive night, right? She was going to read a book, and I think read a book in Bath, I think is what she was going to do. But she
A
shows
book
up.
about the pioneers, though. It sounded pretty
Yeah,
exciting, you know.
yeah, exactly. But she shows up stunning. And I think one of the great scenes is when, you know, he's now in his element, right? And you can see that he becomes a little bit more expressive and a little bit more comfortable when she comes into the kitchen, and he feeds her a spoon of the sauce, and she says, "Oh my god. Oh my god." And she says, "Yes, God." And he says, "When you eat good food, it that brings you close to God." And I just thought that was really powerful. And I thought it was also interesting where he attempts, with her help, to quote Dante
Yeah.
from Paradiso, where he says, how do you say it? But knowledge of God is, the bread of angels. Um, and I thought it also interesting that the name of the restaurant is Paradise.
I was about to go there if you didn't, and they don't make a big deal of that, but I think it's significant.
Yeah. Um, and it's I'm not a very spiritual guy, as you know, but when I think of the beauty of food and I think of what food can mean as not just a means of connection, but also every single thing cooked in this film, we sort of watch them go to the farm. We see the scene where he can't get the fresh herbs, but he's still getting it from a garden. Um, Her being a florist and something coming from the garden, carrying in the branzino, the whole branzino, every single thing, nothing comes from a can, right? And there is truly something, you know, if there is a God, I think food points to that. There's a connection there. And if I'm going to pray over food. And so for me, I get it. That's the lasagna and how it's so good. The only thing you can do is kill yourself.
that
And it's
that
hilarious
may be my favorite line of the movie. You kill
You're just-
yourself.
because he has no idea when food is so good, we don't know how do we express it? Like, how do we tell I mean, it's just, it's so good you make noises. It's so good that you come up with, you become almost cavemanish, right? And so, yeah, he's like, "Oh my God is right."
First of all, a little side note: we had dinner last night with our wives, and the show's social media manager slash my wife Julia kind of made a little joke after you served the food of, "Oh, Chris, you're gonna say grace?" And my wife is actually a religious person, but like while she was kind of joking, it felt right, you know, like
Yeah,
even with us not being religious, like you understand why that is such a tradition because there is this gift in front of you. And even if I'm the one who made the food, it feels like a gift, you know, it's that the universe has provided.
yeah,
Um, One other thing in that scene that I love um is when he's talking to her about Bologna and says, I'll show you someday. And that speaks to his romantic interest to a degree, but I almost take that as more familial, like that he's so taken with her that like he's accepted her as family. Like it's not just this, you know, romantic interest, but it's also it doesn't sound like he means it as a grand romantic gesture. It sounds like, oh, this person would love to experience that and I would love to show it to her. And just so touched by that moment.
yeah. So, yeah, she's definitely, her character brings so much to the film. even though she doesn't have a huge share of the actual running time. Minnie Driver, what a terrific actress she is, and what a terrific role she plays. And I think that it's her character where we start to see perhaps some of the flaws of Stanley Tucci's character, and the beauty of that nuance. And I think that we don't love the way you watch him fumble around things with her. Um, but man, are they good together. But yeah, it's tricky because um he strikes a balance where you still care for his character and you don't actively dislike him. But how he is behaving with her, um, you certainly wish that you could give him some advice. Um, because she is such a beautiful character and you feel for her, even before it comes to a head. Even, just even in the car scene, you just wish she had the wisdom to not go through some of the heartache that he's gonna cause for her.
Yeah, you say give advice to him, and I would say I almost wanna give the advice to her more. Like, this is, it almost of the sense of this is a good guy, but he's not a good guy for you right now. He's not gonna be there to
Right.
provide what you wanna provide, and that doesn't even seem like it doesn't seem like she's in a rush to marry or anything like that, but she wants somebody who is emotionally available and honest to her, um, and I don't think his affair with the Isabella Rossellini character is the only factor in that, but when we find that out later, it certainly is a factor. And then we get the amazing scene between the two women outside the restaurant. Um, that just is phenomenal. And look, I will give Minnie Driver, who I also love, all the credit in the world. She shares the screen with Isabella Rossellini and is not backed down or cowered in any way. And I mean, that's a powerful actress she's on
Well
screen with
said.
there.
Well said.
Um,
And yeah, and Isabella Rossellini, what a gifted actress, but also what a stunning, beautiful woman. That seems regal in a certain way, like sort of transcends, right? And yeah, she's gonna create some conflict between male characters.
yes, absolutely. And I would say with that doesn't seem ill-intentioned. I think she's in this I don't think we find out if they're married or it's just a relationship, but I think she's in this central relationship that obviously is not very fulfilling for her. But I mean, she's so kind to the driver character despite knowing what's going on. Um, it just is, it's another conflicted person in a tough situation. We've talked about brothers and about family to a certain degree, or to a good degree, I would say. One of the things that really strikes me in this movie too is I feel like there's a strong sense of found family within it as well. I've alluded to that a little bit with Alice and Janney, but that's part of what grabs me about the whole party. Is it's like some of these people they've just met. The Campbell Scott character they've just met, and yet they're here together in what looks like a family gathering when you get all my cousins together.
No doubt. Um, I gotta tell you, as somebody that doesn't drink anymore, I look at that night and I want to be there. I want to participate. I mean, just sort of the organic way they dance, right? Like it surely they're all ready to eat. Um, but having to buy time while Louis Prima is on his way, they don't seem to be uncomfortable trying to figure out ways to pass that time. And what an eclectic group of people that just seem like they're supposed to be together. It truly does feel like one of those evenings where um I mean even the restaurateur, he says he better show up. He doesn't know what he's missing. I mean, I think that you watch it as an audience member and go, man, I'm missing this.
Yeah, and in that, you feel like that even though it wasn't his intention, despite what he may claim, he's actually given them a great favor by telling them this lie. Like, giving them the title's the title for a reason. I mean, it may be the biggest night of their lives.
Do you think, Brad, that there's some part of this character who lies just well enough that he hasn't even come to terms with the fact that he's not coming?
Oh, I think that's an interesting point. I mean, I think, and you spoke to what he kind of says. Should like I think intellectually, as Stanley Tucci does towards the end, if you kind of sit him down and say, hey, what's the deal here? Intellectually, he can admit that he wasn't, but I think he gets as tied up in the emotion of it, as anybody. Like that scene, as much as he's a liar in a lot of ways, that scene when he gets up and kisses Primo, I read that as genuine. Like I read that as he is so blown away. Maybe this food's bringing him back to the old country. Um,
I
no, he
agree.
does it in a showy way, but I still think he means it.
Yeah, that's his way, right? And I think effectively it was kind of like when in the kitchen scene where she says, "Oh my God, oh my God." This was his way of saying what you say, which is, "What do I do now? Just kill me."
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right, we did a lot here. I've tried to ask you about a lot. What am I missing? What else did you want to discuss that we haven't hit on?
I think that as somebody that's been in the same job for 26 years, and I take a lot of pride in that, and I have been able to do that because I feel like when I go to work every day, I'm helping people. That it's an honest job. It is it's a job of integrity, and that it is a mutual beneficial situation. But I don't know how much of that, Brad, is just my having to come up with a way to justify capitalism and justify clearly most of us. I just think that if you look at a society, we put um, sustainability above the love of what we do. And, I think Tony Shalhoub says it on the beach so beautifully, where effectively, if you take this away from me, you may as well kill me. If you ask me to make chicken parmesan, I may as well be dead. And I understand that. And there is a piece of me, and I think a piece of most people that acknowledges that, hey, I've sold out. And Tony Shalhoub's character refuses to do that, even if it means giving them what they want until I can give them what I want. He refuses to do that because it's just not the right thing to do. And it speaks to humanity. It just speaks to all the existential things about, why we're here, what we're meant to do. And you can't watch this film and not put the shoe on your foot. You can't think about, man, it sounds great, but I would happily be this, not happily, but unknowingly be this character across the street. I mean, if you look at my life objectively, I'm that guy on some level.
I'm going to give you a lot more credit than that, and say that I think you're maybe, if we have to put it as characters from this movie, maybe a more mature Secundo at this point in your life, like somebody who recognizes that there have to be compromises. But Chris, one thing I will say for you, and for any of the audience that doesn't know, I'm also in recovery. It's something Chris and I share, that you've really never been less than genuine in your life. You've had a journey towards what you want that genuine to be. So maybe I'm going off subject a little bit, but I appreciate why you appreciate that. You know what I'll also say that I find interesting, and maybe this is because lefty that I am, I'm very much a capitalist. Is Primo's not anti-capitalism. Like he wants people to be in the restaurant and he wants to serve them. And I'm sure he's fine with making money. He doesn't care that much about it, but and then he wants his brother to be happy, but he's not willing to compromise what he believes in order to do it. And I think that's a great thing. Look, I'm to kind of put some of the sausage making out there. I'm recording a few episodes before we launch the podcast, and I wasn't sure what order I'm going to do them in. I'm 99% sure I'm rolling with this one first. I'll cut it if I don't, and I'll cut this if I don't. But part of the reason is exactly the theme you're hitting on. As I was really thinking about watching it last night. Look, I'm no primo, but thinking about the fact that I'm starting this in order to do something I love. I'm not going to make any money out of this for a while. I would love to make some money off of it eventually. I'm a capitalist for that. But it is this idea of, boy, I love movies. Why don't I pursue something that involves movies? I'm just not that good a chef to do something involving food like that.
No, I think that my son asked me tonight, well, what movie are we going to talk about, and what are we going to? And I said, I don't know, buddy. I mean, we're going to talk about Big Night, but I don't know what it's going to be like, and I love that. I love that. I love that we could sit here and do this for another 2 hours, right? Just kind of hacking away at a film, and what a gift as the people who again, this movie was shot in 1996, right? But it's a living thing that's now out there. And I don't recall, Brad, what's the running time? Is it a little over 90 minutes?
That's
Something
what
in
it
that
feels like.
ballpark?
I didn't look specifically, but it feels like a 90-minute range movie.
And we could easily talk about it for 90 minutes, right? And only scratch the surface of the material that was put out there for us to really process. I'll just sort of say it again that, for a guy who grew up in a family where I think that cuisine is how we expressed ourselves to each other, to watch that play out in film. And again, that connection. I mean, my wife and I fell in love over a music like Louis Prima and a connection to our heritages and the value system that we both share. That food is just a central part of that. And our families are so connected, like yours, and food has just been a consistent theme and all of that. Big Night, it just feels like family, and I love that I'm not waiting for something to happen in it. It's happening. Um,
And you know what I think about with saying not waiting for something to happen. Obviously, we haven't stayed away from spoilers in this. I would say to anybody out there though who listens to this before watching this movie, please go watch this movie anyway. It's a vibes and a theme movie much more than it is a plot movie. And like you could have every scene spoiled for you and still get a ton out of this one, I think.
yeah, well said. Oh, in fact, I think that you call it the Big Night because Louis Prima's coming, and whether he comes or not is not what the movie is about. And I think that's the great thing about a lot of the books I've read, or a lot of the movies I've seen, or even shows I've seen that have been powerful. They'll tell you the end at the beginning because they know that it's not as important as what's going to happen along the way.
Yeah, I tend to look. I like things like crime stories where the plot really matters, but I tend to be a theme and a feel over plot guy at the end of the day. And this movie is like it's all about the theme and the feelings. So to wrap up here, we already mentioned one, but I like to leave our audience, which Chris, I think our audience is going to be 7 people. That's my prediction here. It's going to be 7 people, counting me and you, inclusive. Um, so we already mentioned The Fighter, which it's great that we both had that on our list. Are there other movies that you might recommend for people who love Big Night?
And so the animated Ratatouille is one that comes to me. I think that not to be just too simple, hey, look, the movie's shot in a restaurant, but a movie that just sort of takes me to the place that it's set. And I think that the type of cuisine is just really important to there's a heritage there. You feel like you're there. And just seeing the kitchen scenes.
Are you just gonna knock everything off my list? I had 3 movies and now you've named 2 of them. But yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Um, what else comes to mind? I mean, I think that for some reason this just happened to here sitting here, but a Bradley Cooper in Burnt, that movie comes up. But
You know, I
again,
actually haven't seen that one. I'll need to check that out. So
you know,
I've
as
got one I've got one for you that I'm not sure if you've seen. Have you seen, Dinner Rush with Danny Aiello?
I have not.
Man, you're right after we finish this recording, you're gonna have to go see Dinner Rush. It's uh, it's a restaurant set movie, but also with a lot of family theme. His son's the chef in the restaurant he owns. A lot of battle between authenticity, and in this case, not callous food, but the son kind of wanting to do something new, something different. Maybe overtones of The Bear in that as well. And it's just kind of a rip roaring movie. Yeah, Dinner Rush. I'd highly recommend to you and others. I didn't
Noted.
write this down. I didn't write this down, but and this is a weird left field one, but I watched Saving Private Ryan for the first time in years a couple weeks ago, and there's something in that brotherhood thing, and these people that are not literally brothers in that case, but that are inextricably bound together, and one's fate informs the other's fate at every moment. That I don't know. It just there was something thematic I found had some crossover there.
What a great movie that I haven't seen in a while either. Yeah, but yeah, you have the clearly saving the last Ryan brother, but also the brotherhood that they create. And what a powerful theme in that movie. Just the idea, here's a man, 40 years later wondering whether he lived the life in honor of his fallen brother, and that weight, right, that we
Yeah.
all carry that sometimes we can't put words to. But the other thing just around passion around something that we can imbibe, one of I think our mutual favorites, I can't help but think of Sideways. Obviously, Sideways is a lot more dialogue driven. Um, but there is a connection to Santa Barbara County, and just what a beautiful place. And oddly enough, I've been to Santa Barbara County with your brother, Brad, which was
I'm sorry.
but yeah, yeah, exactly.
Oh, I should say my brother was supposed to be doing a record with me tonight, and he flaked, so he's dead to me. I think we should establish that on the podcast canonically. My brother is dead to me.
Fair enough. And as he should be. Um you were trying to plant the seed, Brad. This is and he just wasn't here for you.
All right, well, final thing. What else have you seen recently that you'd recommend?
What have I seen recently that I would recommend?
Doesn't have to be something new, by the way. Just anything you've watched that springs to mind.
hmm, I'm feeling I love when you put me on the spot, Brad.
Hey, remember, we have the power to edit. So if you don't have anything here, or it takes you a minute to get to it. That's okay. We can make you sound smarter than you are. I'm leaving that in,
Yeah,
by the way.
well, hopefully you can, because this is certainly not my shining moment here. Um, interestingly enough, I think most people have seen this movie, but thinking about Brotherhood, goodness gracious, what about Good Will Hunting?
Uh, yeah. I mean, and that's Julia and I were talking about that last night after watching it. That's 1 year later, I think. Is that 97? It's right
Yeah,
in that range. So it's Minnie Driver, back to back years, knocking it out of the park, in my opinion.
yeah.
Um,
And to think Ben Affleck and Casey Affleck, who are actually brothers, but I don't think there's any doubt in anyone's mind that Cole Hauser, Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, and Casey Affleck, that those four are brothers in that movie. And you talk about characters who just continue to live. Um, I mean, and again, I'm in recovery. I have, those guys like to sit around and drink, but I to this day wish for an invitation. I mean, I would love to hang out with those guys.
Yeah, I would, I would drink some club soda and hang out and hear the stories. I think we've gotten a lot on tape here to put together. Thank you so much for joining me today, and this the first recording of your favorite flick.
I can't wait to do it again, man.
All right, talk to you soon.
See you, bub.
Well, that's it for our first episode. If you stuck around this long, I hope that means you found something you enjoyed in our conversation. I host, produce, and edit the show, in as much as you can call it produced or edit it. Julia Mott is our social media manager. The music you heard at the beginning and are hearing now is by my friend Richard Bates and his band The Huns, from their great album To Skyward. Thank you, team. If you like what you heard, please follow, rate, review, subscribe, all the things. You can follow us on Blue Sky and Instagram at Your Favorite Flick, or shoot us an email at yourfavoriteflick@gmail.com. Huns, take us out.
She spent those 2 weeks cuddling up with the sun. If I spend my days working for a dream, even one with higher rate of success, made crazy stupid money for crazy stupid things. Is that any part of keeping your heart? If I spent those same days brushing up on poetics, that's 14 times 365 inflections of I dearly love you. It's not just preparation. It's not just guessing what you need. It's not just communication. It's not just almighty timing. It's always, at least, a unique and shifting combination of some of those 3 or 4. If wishing made it so, I'd be just as talented and just as well known. If wishing made it so, I'd be just as handsome and just as flat broke. If wishing made it so, you wouldn't sleep at night. You would not sleep till you were by my side. If wishing made it so, tell you I love